Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the program. Today we're going to talk about footprints that indicate Neanderthals or another hominid, which we'll talk about in a second, climbed a volcano right after it erupted. Now the volcano they're talking about is called Rocco Monfina, which is a little bit northwest of Naples. And this is, you can see just from the satellite image that there is a giant crater indicative of many explosions in the past. Now, this is an extinct volcano, meaning that it's pretty much exhausted all of the magma that's underneath the Earth's crust here. And so now it's just like I don't know if it's a hot spring, but it's just, there are just very few gases that come out every now and then. But anyway, the last time this place was active was about 350,000 years ago, which again, we'll get into these dates in a second. But there are these footprints here. I think there's about 62 total types of imprints. Now, these were made when there was lava on the ground, so it was freshly after the eruption. They called this the devil's footsteps by the locals because it doesn't make any sense that a human's able to walk on lava right after an eruption. And but it wasn't dated until about, I don't know, like 2002, around there, 2003. And before then it was just a legend by the locals, and no one really bothered to look into it. And that's how it got its age. And at the time, it was the oldest known human footprints in outside of Africa. They've since I think about 7 years ago, about 2012, 2013, around there, they found these other footprints they're called the Happisburgh footprints in England. And just really quick, here's the River Thames here. Happisburgh is here, and these footprints date to about 800,000 years ago. 800,000 years, just as an aside before we go on with the article, 800,000 years ago is starting to become an increasingly interesting date. Partially, if you look, we didn't really talk about it in the Bruce Fenton interview. We talked about it a little bit, but human divergence from the other hominid, Neanderthals and Denisovans and Erectus was thought to be about 200,000 years ago, and then they pushed it back with the Mislia cave. And then they pushed it further back with the Morocco guy, Jebel or Hud, that man, 315,000 years ago, is when Homo sapiens really started to develop their traits. But 800,000 years is starting to become a very interesting year because a lot of stuff was going on. There were climate shifts. There's a known comet impact now. Is increasingly being thought about as the new date of when Homo erectus, or whatever archaic human at the time, they're strongly thinking it's Homo erectus, started branching off into these more diversified, specialized species, among them Neanderthals, Denisova, and then us, and then Floresiensis, and all these other hominins. So if you guys look into the multi-regional emergences, it's very interesting stuff. But anyway, I kind of digress. These footprints, okay, they're found in central Italy, northwest of, or southern to central Italy. And this Devil's Trail, again, wasn't dated until about 2002, 2001, around there. This, again, throws a huge monkey wrench into what they've been talking about not only like 15, 20 years ago. There weren't supposed to be that very much human activity during this time. Now, this is lower Pleistocene, if you want to take an archaeological term. They weren't supposed to be people grazing about like this, especially near a volcano. Why would they be doing this? There's a lot of questions here, but the fact remains that there are footprints here. They think that the dozens of impressions that they found were left by a small group of human ancestors, and even a few animals snaking their way down the mountain. So they could be wolves, or they could be domesticated dogs. If they are domesticated dogs, A, they were huge, and B, domestication is not supposed to go back that far, right? So again, this kind of leaves some credence might be a little bit a strong word, but there's definitely something to investigate here. If the technology known as domestication, the technique, whatever you want to call it, existed 800,000 years ago at the very least. Or I'm sorry, 350,000 years ago at the very least, because this is the last time that this mountain erupted. And by the way, the dating that they did, it doesn't mention in the article, but if you look into it a little bit further, it's argon-argon dating. So that has the capability of dating way beyond 350,000 years. The initial reports, I think it's worth mentioning, they thought it was about 400,000, 380,000 years. So we're talking between 320 to 400,000 year window where this could have conceivably occurred, which isn't that big of a window when we're talking about geological timescales. So there's a total of 67 indentations left by the scuffle of hands, feet, and legs, all divided across 3 distinct tracks headed away from the mountain summit. So I think the hypothesis here is that the volcano erupted and then people left after the volcano, shortly after the volcano erupted or during. I still don't know how they would do that. I'm assuming they were barefoot because they studied the arches and the feet and they compare them to other sites, which we'll get into in a second. And then another detail that they found were another 14 prints, larger than the others. So it could be a different group. It could be a group even later that came later. They head up the mountain rather than down. So maybe this is a different team to investigate. There's all kinds of stuff here. And if they were sending teams to investigate, then that implies a lot of things beyond just hunter-gatherers. That implies some sort of organization, some sort of community capable of even going back and having the wherewithal and the stability to send a team out there and investigate what happened. Radiometric and geological dating, already mentioned the argon-argon dating of the various rock strata. They were cast about 350,000 years ago. They don't really know who left them, but I have some comments on this. There are at least 5 different bodies behind the marks. Further investigations could help whittle down ideas on the sex, body mass, and perhaps even heights of the trekkers. So they are currently looking into that. And here's an interesting part of the article that I have some problems with. So given our own Homo sapiens ancestors developed their characteristic traits only 315,000 years ago, that's the date of Jebel or Hued man. And again, if you're reading articles like this, you have to understand that date is only what the allowable date, that they're not willing to venture off beyond this date because, again, the man in Jebel or Hued was found, he died 315,000 years ago. So who knows how long he had been there, where he came from, and how long those people were there. So this brings me back to 800,000 years ago. Humanity, some version of humanity, whether it's AMHs or someone very close to us. Because again, what's a species? Because Neanderthals and Homo sapiens and Denisovans, we were all mixing together. So it's not, Neanderthals is not a separate species from us. It's close enough to us that we could have viable offspring. So again, humanity could go back 800,000, 900,000 years ago, and it seems to center around this time frame. Now, a lot of people are attaching some sort of extraterrestrial intelligence or something happened in our genetic code at that time, and whether it's a mutation or some deliberate manipulation, I've heard some compelling cases on both sides, and I'm not ruling that out at all. I know there are a few comments. This past week, I was reading them both on BitChute and on YouTube, and on Twitter too, that some people thought that I was just throwing away the idea of the ancient alien hypothesis or any type of extraterrestrial influence. I'm not ruling that out. I just like to go with the hard evidence. Now, I have a ton of theories on that, but that strays away from the point of this video. Maybe when I do my podcast, which it's definitely coming, guys. It's definitely coming. I'll be free to really go off on that and explore my thoughts. But I do want to bring someone else in and talk to them about that. But anyway, so this state 350,000 years ago is the alleged date they're using of when Homo sapiens started developing those characteristic traits. And we can be pretty confident they weren't members of our own species, the ones that left this trail. They think it might have been Heidelbergensis. But I wasn't able to talk to Bruce about Heidelbergensis because he had some theories about that. But he thinks that it's proven that Heidelbergensis is just another type of modern human that we could have interbred with them with no problem. But anyway, that's another story. I don't think this claim is accurate. We can be pretty confident they weren't members of our own species. They might have been. It just might have been an earlier version of us, biologically compatible with us, but again, not because we're talking 350,000 years ago. So how much change can happen in that time? That's a lot of generations of people. But anyway, I digress. One of the clear imprints provides clear evidence of a grown human male. The shapes of many of the footprints point to an interesting possibility. The broad nature of the hindfoot area with the low rise of the arch looks suspiciously like the feet of individuals buried in the Sima de los Huesos pit of bones. Now let's look at the map here. Sima de los Huesos, if you don't know, is like this deep, deep burial pit. I don't know how else to describe it, of thousands and thousands of bones. And some of which date to about, I think, 480,000 years ago of humans. And it's located, I don't know exactly where it is. It's like Burgos, Spain. Yeah, it's around here, near these mountains here. And this site has yielded a lot of stuff. And again, I wasn't able to pick Bruce's brain about it, but this site is very significant. And if you guys, I know most of you guys that watch my channel, that you guys are very, very glued to the screen when it comes to ancient human origins. If you're just starting out, you should investigate this Sima de los Huesos site for sure, because they found bodies in there that have Denisovan DNA, Neanderthal DNA, and then Heidelbergensis. So it seems like this is a trove of information or a dot on the node, whatever you want to call it, that you're going to have to refer back to a lot when we're talking about human origins, especially beyond 250, 300,000 years ago. A couple things about this site too is the Moroccan Jebel Irhoud guy was found here, right close to the Strait of Gibraltar. So that's very interesting that we find this Sima de los Huesos site here, these footprints over here on the Italian peninsula, and then the older footprints that I mentioned earlier, the Happisburg footprints up here. And this, again, presumably there was no English Channel back then. Doggerland was in full swing back then, presumably. I've never seen a map of the shorelines back then, but I'm just assuming that that's what the case was. It definitely didn't look like this for obvious reasons. So yeah, that's just something to think about as more and more evidence is gathered. And then also, you can't forget Neander Valley and all of these other places. So anyway, the feet in the hindfoot area, the low rise of the arch looks suspiciously like the people they found in Spain in this pit, who are at least 100,000 years older. The owners of those 430,000-year-old remains have been the topic of debate. So yeah, they haven't nailed down exactly what. I think Heidelbergensis is being ruled out though, but Denisovan DNA for sure was existing there. And just to give you guys a reference, I mean, Denisova Cave is thousands of miles away from Spain. So one of the theories that I heard about Denisova Cave itself is that there probably wasn't a large-scale settlement of Denisovans there. Again, it might have been an outpost, some sort of scout, whatever it was. It was there because that site was inhabited for a while, then it would be uninhabited, then they'd come back. So, and it's in the middle of nowhere. When you look at all the different archaeological sites that have human remains or some sort of tool or some sort of remnant of human activity there. Anyway, Assuming they are truly Neanderthals, it's a reasonable, even if not solid, bet that the footprints were left by a gang of young Neanderthal adults. So here's another interesting detail. It's clear from the impressions that nobody was in a hurry, so they were taking their time. They weren't running away. It seems like they were comfortable enough to walk on this the freshly erupted volcano. Maybe they were gathering resources. Maybe they were trying to harvest. I don't know if they were harvesting the lava or some some geodes or some sort of mineral. Maybe because they were tool making and they were intrepid and they seemed to be more advanced than we give them. Maybe not on our level, but they seem to have an idea of where they're going and a purpose of why they were doing that, going up this volcano. That can't be an accident. They couldn't have been just passing by. They must have had some sort of purpose for being there. Based on the leisurely pace of around 1 meter per second, the handful of footsteps heading uphill, and a scattering of basalt artifacts found in the vicinity, this was just another day in the life by an active volcano. So people, it's well known that especially active volcanoes, the area around the volcano is very fertile. Volcanic ash and all that stuff, all these other minerals enrich the ground, and maybe they were hip to this. Maybe they knew that if they took some of this or settled around the volcano within a reasonable distance, that they were able to farm and all that stuff. Now, farming may or may not have existed back then. If it did, good luck finding any evidence of it, because that's almost 500,000 years ago. That type of stuff tends to disappear and gets reabsorbed into the earth. Who knows why they were there? But again, it's not open and shut case right now. This is, again, active volcanoes in the remote past coinciding with humans. This is just a subject we're scratching the surface on, because it's not a lot headway has been made in terms of that. I mean, now there's a lot more research going into this field, but they're just getting started, essentially. And by the way, they were barefoot. So how are they walking barefoot through 300 degrees Celsius flow of billowing pyroclastic insanity? How is that working out? I don't know. They're not sure. They think there was probably some sort of blanket, I guess. The researchers estimate the blanket would need to have cooled to at least 50 degrees, not a literal blanket, by the way. I mean, this volcanic ash, this blanket of ash, whatever you want to call it. It was cooled to 50 degrees Celsius at least, so they could walk on it. Several hours needed to have passed between an eruption and the trek, all the while leaving footprints. So again, this is freshly right after the volcano erupted. So if this is true, then they were anticipating the volcano erupting, and then they even anticipated, they had the plan for getting in and out. And they brought dogs with them. Or wolves. There are giant paw prints found as well. They make a funny joke, disaster tourism, but I really don't know exactly what happened, because there's supposed to be hot clouds of poisonous gas, muddy ash. There should be fire everywhere, and just the air quality must be awful. But it wasn't that way. Apparently, these people left. They're coming and going. So what do you guys think? What do you guys think happened? Have you ever walked on hot coals? Is that a thing? I don't even know how hot the coals are when you walk through them. I'm talking about just like, on vacation, you guys see that, that meme, or everyone's heard of people walking across hot coals on vacation. Is it something like that? Are these humans, do they develop some sort of callus over time? Because that's true too. I know people who walk barefoot all the time. They develop a callus. They don't even feel stuff. They don't feel pain down there, whether it becomes desensitized or this thick natural sole develops. And if our body is capable of developing a sole like that on the bottom of their feet, then nature is usually not wrong about that stuff. There's a rhyme and reason to our body. So if our body has that certain reaction, then perhaps it was just cool. It was meant to be like that. And maybe Neanderthals, Homo heidelbergensis, whoever it was back then making those prints, maybe they just had a better capability than we do for developing a thick sole on our feet. Anyway, a lot that needs to be done with this. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. What do you guys think about 800,000 years ago? What do you guys think happened? There is a crater, and there is interstellar objects coming into Earth's atmosphere at the time. There probably was a comet impact at the time, most likely 99% sure. But anyway, let me know what you guys think was going on, and I'll talk to you guys later.